Is December 6th lessons and caroling?
7th.
Okay, first weekend.
Yep. We start Advent in November.
Advent 1 is usually right after Thanksgiving.
Right after Thanksgiving. Okay. So we'll give it just a minute.
Let's pick up the greenery.
I'm sorry?
The choir ordered greenery.
I think that's this one.
Yeah.
And we usually have it like, all like 9 a.m. or even like maybe even 8.
Yeah, I think they put it up Saturday.
Okay. Well, let's get started. I may, speaking to my colleague down the table here, I may stay seated where I am for this. Having been,
We don't want to be on camera with you.
having been on my feet for a little while, so I think with this group that should work just fine.
Should be you, but don't worry.
Yeah. And we'll leave room for those, if there are some who may yet join us, to come join me right by my side. I'm so glad and grateful that we can kick this off together in person. I've been praying and thinking and meditating on getting this going as a ministry for the better part of a year now, maybe more. And I'm really excited to sort of have set a framework that we'll go through a little bit today and talk through by the time we're finished about what these sessions that we'll meet on Zoom starting in January will look like and feel like. But I have some of the presentation that I have today is similar to those I've given in the Dean's Hour and at Parish Retreat and Vestry Retreat in the last year. So these have been sort of the proving grounds, as it were, for putting this information and seeing the ways that it's certainly, as I've shared, how it's touched my heart and my practice to sort of receive and see the ways that it's doing so beyond me out in our community, which led me to believe that this is a ministry that we could seed on a regular basis. So today I'm going to share a little bit, review a little bit about collects and what we're going to be about, what we're doing, and then we'll actually hold some space to practice together here. And then after we do that a little bit, I'll talk through sort of how we'll gather once we get started in earnest on Zoom in January. So before I even get started with that, I actually say let's go around the room, just do a short introduction of your name and sort of what connects you, what is calling to you about this ministry, and being able to sort of take this on as a practice. Robin, would you be ready to kick us off?
Yes. My name is Robin Palmer, and I really enjoyed this when I listened to it from the Dean's Hour. And what hooked me into it was sort of the poetry aspect of it, and how we also have the poetry that's in our music. And there was one hymn in particular that has always sort of stuck with me, and so, which is based on a poem by Van Stone. So that's what brought me. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm Rob Mood. I'm always looking for ways that I can be part of what's going on as I get less mobile, and this seemed like a pretty good opportunity. You don't actually have much more to say than that.
That's just right. Glad you're here.
I'm Diane Maurice, and it is an act of rebellion for me because after Rhoda Montgomery introduced the Women's Bible Study 12 years ago to the idea of collect writing, I wanted, when I was the chair of the Liturgy Council, I wanted us to experiment with it, not to put it into services. Didn't want to upset the bishop, so I just want to be a wife. And I'm afraid that all of the clergy at that time thought that was just almost as bad an idea as bringing dogs into worship. So I'm real happy to be here to have the opportunity.
All right, thanks, Diane.
I don't know if I can follow. But my name is Heather Lazar, and I have been looking for a way to express myself. I've done a lot of writing in my life, but what I really difficult is making it personal. And I thought this was a good way for me to personally connect with worship, and so I want to get outside my comfort zone and do this.
Good for you. Thank you.
My
Okay.
name is Gay Gullidge, and at last year's vestry retreat, we spent some time with this, and I really enjoyed that. And I also am always seeking ways to express myself, what I was saying, and different types of prayer and worship. Fascinating. So.
Great.
I'm Belinda Matusik, and I've actually been talking to Nat about this for a little bit. And so I'm a terrible writer, and I'm looking forward to learning better skills. And also, I'm actually here to hold Nat accountable too. I'm encouraging him. I've been encouraging him.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that you're doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for being a part of it.
Push. Push.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Rohde. I'm a visual artist, formerly an architect, and I've had this grand idea of turning my painting practice into sort of a painter-poet practice, and have not had a clear sense of how to do that. I'm planning on showing my work here next year, so when I saw this, I thought this was a really good way to experiment.
Thanks for coming.
I'm Kay Lewis, and as I'm slowing down some of my regular work, I'm trying to get started in doing some writing, and I thought this would be interesting. I missed the earlier one.
I'm Sarah Jackson, and I find as I'm beginning to lose my words and question how much I'm losing my thought in my brain, that I'm hoping that maybe by being able to express things in a collect and in a written form, I'll be able to kind of capture my spiritual life and prayer.
Beautiful.
I'm Ann Miller. I'm one of the choir members here in the 11 o'clock choir. And I guess for me, I was raised a Southern Baptist, so praying was just natural. And I've always enjoyed praying and loved to write prayers. And so I don't feel like I'm a good writer either, but I think I'm a good prayer. So
Which she is.
So hopefully I can combine those two.
I'm Claudia Watson. I'm the other choir person, and unfortunately, choir people, especially the cathedral choir, miss
The team's
hour. I've been a cradle Episcopalian. I've been in the choir since I was in 4th grade. I've been to college. I'm just sung forever. And when I was at my last church in Pennsylvania, I wrote for the newsletter called it Notes from the Lost, which is where we sang from, and just musings on things, choir, music, poetry, things like that. And I put this is a way to condense that into something a little more personal and prayerful. And I'm looking forward to trying my hand at this.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Zach Kaufman, fairly new to the community. I'm looking for kind of new ways to get involved. This seemed like an exciting one. Beyond that, I really treasured kind of how this sort of prayer follows me in my weekly prayer routine, day to day, coming out of Sunday. It's been a wonderful thing, and I don't know, and it's just contributing in that way is exciting.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm glad for the opportunity to hear around the table. As I've been thinking about this, as I said, for some time now, and it's a beautiful thing to sort of put that invitation out and have folks step into it and respond to it. And it's a gift to me to hear the things about what, even just in the introduction of the concept, is connecting with your hearts and spirits to shift your pattern of rhythm and practice in your prayer life. And that's a very humbling thing for me to take on as someone holding space for you all to step into and inhabit today and when we get going in earnest in January. One thing I want to make sure I speak out really early on before I forget is I'm glad everybody's here. This session is not a prerequisite. And I know there are plenty of folks who have reached out to say that they intend to join us when we get going in January. This session is an orientation more than anything, and an opportunity for us just to sort of get, like I said, get oriented towards what we're going to be doing together and what this space holding and mode of prayer is about. So we'll get into it a little bit now. So this is an idea that really came as collect writing entered my imagination at a clergy gathering we had for the clergy of the diocese. Gosh, it's been 2 years ago now. Mark Oakley is the Dean of Southwark Cathedral in London. For those who are able to come with us on pilgrimage next summer, our first Sunday of Eucharist is going to be spent with Mark and his community at Southwark. Mark is a poet himself and a scholar of poetry, particularly of George Herbert and John Donne. And this was really one of the touchstones of his presentation to us as clergy, is say that our Anglican, and we can say Episcopal worship, is a process, a full immersion in poetry. Robin, you were alluding to this right off the bat, that he sort of introduced to us that our whole form of liturgy in the written word that we give life to in reading, and when we're worshiping together, we're speaking it. But that's one of the interesting things we'll be exploring together, is that these are prayers as collects that we're most familiar with having a relationship with them orally or aurally, depending on if you're on the giving or receiving end of it in worship. But these are texts that we can have relationship with outside of just that 30 seconds or however long it takes a celebrant to read them when we worship. And that's one of the things I started to realize in studying them, is how beautiful and meaningful these prayers are, and how much power and how much is packed into them. And we go over them so quickly, and then we don't think about them usually for another 12 months until we get that same collect come through our pattern of worship again. And that's kind of a shame, really, because they are really powerful vehicles for giving focus and shape to our spiritual lives. But as Rob, so everything's our prayers, the music, our hymns, the Eucharistic prayers that we use, all of it is poetry. And we do well, both those of us who lead worship in any form, ordained or otherwise, and those who are sort of in the receiving end or experiential end of it, do well when we think. For me, I try to keep this in mind when I read these prayers, so that it's just as easy. And I know no one here has had this experience anywhere, but it's possible to read these prayers as if you're reading the phone book. But they're not. And they're meant to be read as poetry. And so I try to be present and mindful of that when I read them. And I hope that you can receive them and experience them in worship as poetry as well. So collects, what are collects? Collects are prayers with form and purpose. I mean, this can be said of nearly any kind of prayer, but it is especially true of what makes a collect, right? It is a container, and its purpose, and I said, is to literally, when we have them at the beginning of our worship services, in a Eucharistic format, they literally are meant to collect our presence and focus our hearts and minds on what our church in our lectionary and the readings that we have assigned for any given week, what we're trying to digest and distill about our spiritual lives in that given service, in that week, whether it's like we're doing right now within the season of ordinary time. When we get to Advent 1 on November 30th, then we'll have a first collect for Advent. And that will remind us it's really the first reminder when we worship of if we're in a season, what the season is trying to guide us into praying about, contemplating, and daring even then to live in our lives because of what a particular point in our liturgical practice calls us to consider. So it's form, and we'll look at the form in a second, so it's not a free-form thing. There is actually a container for it, and it has a purpose, right? And we'll get to that as well. But it's not extemporaneous prayer. It can't be, a collect can't be something that sort of rambles from one thing onto the next. It's focused, and I think as I've been reflecting on this in the last couple of years, I think that's one of the things that makes it a gift as a spiritual practice. So we'll get into that. So this is if you're familiar with the term, there's an app for that. In our tradition of worship, we say there's a collect for that. There is a collect in our prayer book for everything under the sun, truly. And if you haven't spent time, and I'll give you some page references in a second, if you haven't spent time with the section in our prayer book dedicated to collects, that's sort of the first invitation I'm going to give everyone today, is to start making that a place that you spend time with in your own spiritual life. Whether that's taking time within a given week, so you can actually look ahead. We'll peek a little bit ourselves today at what the collect of the day will be for next Sunday. But that's something that every one of us can do to sort of give ourselves a preview of what is the prayer book saying before we get to Sunday, that we should be collecting our thoughts and our hearts into when we get to church on Sunday. And there are other occasions within life that are also mentioned in that section of the prayer book. So we have collects for so many things. And that's one of the gifts of our tradition, that we can turn to that to say, when I don't, Sarah had to leave us, but when we don't have words, right, this is one of the gifts of being a prayer book tradition, that we can look into these sections and say, what is it, either in a section that is organized by sort of secular world or style of experience, but what's interesting is that as we get to know the pattern of the collects themselves, you can start to know where in the church year you go to find some of these collects that really speak to you. And you'll find that there are. So we have a collect for nearly everything. So to orient ourselves to collects in the prayer book, just to note, as a reminder, that it divides, the section for collects is divided into stylistic categories. There's a whole, it mirrors one another, a section for, as it labels it, contemporary versus traditional, and which maps contemporary. Just to be clear, it's kind of confusing. It doesn't use consistent language for how worship services that follow it in the prayer book, but contemporary is Rite 2, so that's our 9 o'clock service, and our traditional language in the collect section is Rite 1. So within each of those sections, you'll find under the bullet point I have here for types, you'll find these different breakdowns of categories. Seasons of the year, which include liturgical seasons, so that is Advent, Christmas, season after the Epiphany, Lent, Eastertide, Holy Week actually takes up some space in between, Eastertide, Pentecost, and then back into the season after Pentecost, which we're nearly finished with. And then what it calls holy days, and some of those are basically fixed points of worship that don't necessarily fall on Sundays, but are fixed days of the year, what they call common of saints. So we actually do, this is, if you're not familiar with this, our tradition does lift up acknowledgement of saints within our worship. And so they're each one of, you'll find if you explore this section of the prayer book, it will remind you of what day of the year that feast day for that saint is, and then a prayer for that saint. And it also, sorry, that's under Holy Days. Common of Saints is a really fascinating thing, especially for where we are having just observed the Feast of All Saints, is in that section, it talks about types of saints, martyrs, and it basically allows, is just martyrs is one example, there are several others, that it allows for us to acknowledge saints that aren't already included in the prayer book. That book, that canon, as it were, is not closed. It gives us a form that we can use and adapt to celebrate those faithful who have gone before us, who we wish to remember, as we did in the Dean's Hour in particular, but also in our Worship for All Saints Sunday. So that's there. And then lastly, various occasions, which includes things for our national life, for the life of a congregation or a diocese or the wider church, family life. There's a lot that's included in there. So I put that up to you for you as an invitation, like I said, to go and explore. Lastly, I've included something that we refer colloquially in professional church life as concluding collects. It's on page 394. So that comes in when we worship together and we have the prayers of the people. And you'll notice that there are, a lay person will always lead the intercessions. And when those prayers finish, the celebrant, as a priest, will finish it with a prayer. We'll draw it all in a prayer. And that's what we call a concluding collect. So we've prayed for the people in all of the states of need in the world, categories of things that the church says that we should always be praying for when we get together as a body of Christ. And then these are collects that help us, okay, we prayed for everything, now focus us back into where do we go from here. I put this up here, so this is here for, yes, the priests use this on Sunday morning, but you can use these things in your own patterns of worship. If you're going through and holding space for prayer that is going through your own hand, how do I draw this to a close? These are prayers that we can turn to sort of lean on, say, okay, this is what I'm going to use when I've prayed for the things that I can think to pray for. Now, how do I bring it back to God? And that's what these collects, concluding collects, are there for. So that's a brief summary of the invitation, specifically of spaces to begin exploring. If you want to really go beyond that in the next couple of months, you can keep flipping through. Once you familiarize yourself with the form, you will be able to recognize in some of the more particular services that exist, that are included with the prayer book, there are more collects that are not included in that, which include, there's a section about, it's called Ministration to the Sick. So there's a whole couple pages in there that are collects for those who are sick, for those present to those who are sick, for medical professionals, for any number of things. Zach, I'm going to look to you because you're a relatively new parent. There's a whole thing for Thanksgiving of a child in the prayer book. And with that, there's a page and inclusion of prayers for parents in early phases of that experience. So it is a treasure trove. So once you get oriented to this, you can keep exploring that through the prayer book and find other places where they exist. Okay, so this gets us back to form. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time that I've heard attributed to Orson Welles, that says, the enemy of art is the absence of limitation. That actually, if we could do anything, if there was no budget, no money were not an issue, resource of, thinking about as a painter, right? If access to a certain type of paint or media or whatever it is were not an issue, in some ways it's debilitating. I could do anything, so what do I do? And sometimes it is helpful to the artist, it almost always is, to have some limitations that force us, and I'll talk about this in a second, but sometimes the more limitations we can have imposed to us especially in the initial phases of a creative process, the more it can help the creativity start to flow. I don't have to think about choosing everything. I just need to start choosing a couple different things. And then if I start there, then I can see some other ways to be creative in the context we're talking about, in the words that we use to pray. So here's the literary form that we're going to be working with. And this, I have inherited, I forgot to put this on the slide. But this is from a poet named Padraig Ó Tuama, who is an Irishman. He's been for a long time associated with an initiative called Poetry Unbound that's been associated with a long time public radio show hosted by Krista Tippett called On Being. He's an active poet himself. He was also at the same clergy conference I was describing earlier that Mark Oakley came to. And he was the one who gave us this presentation. And so he described the form of the collect as 5 folds. And when he says a fold, what this winds up being is it's thinking about, if we think about there's all these things in our hearts or in our spirits, like things that we have yearning for or that we wish to communicate with God. If you're anything like me, those things just keep piling up in your life and they get tucked away in some place inside you, and it just keeps coming. And a struggle of prayer life is figuring out how do you unpack that in relationship with God. It's a little bit like that really bad old joke, do you have Prince Albert in a can? We'll let him out, right? We've got to let some of these things out. And so these folds each fold is effectively functions as an invitation to unpack things that we've been, we could say hoarding, or at least kind of storing away that we wish to spend some time expressing to God. So it's a 5-fold pattern and form that we're using. So step 1 is to name the one you're addressing. Step 2 is unfold or unpack or further describe the name of the one you're addressing. Number 3 is name one desire. So here's the real collect. Here's the real focus part. If you want to start it's got to be just one desire. That's what makes this different from intercessions, which is like we're going to name 10 desires and then we're going to come back. And for a collect, we have to name one desire. Step 4, fold 4, unfold the desire you've named, or further say one more thing. Unpack just a little bit more the one desire that you've named. And then lastly, finish with a bird of praise. Now that's poetry upon poetry. That's a poet's description, right, of what we're up to. And you'll see in a second what a bird of praise is really like a flourish. It's saying we're finishing this with saying something about God that's beautiful. And so that's rooted in a concept that this is a practice of beauty. And at the very end, the grounding point that we finish the prayer with, we are making sure that we finish with beauty. And that's the language we are in taking on this form. It's staying consistent with saying that beauty is a language and a medium unto itself by which we communicate with God. And we understand that God desires to communicate with us through beauty. And so that's part of an understanding for us of the purpose of that beauty exists at all in the world. Beauty exists because God wants it to. It didn't have to be that way because God wants to use it as a medium for us to understand that we are loved. That's where we're finishing off every collect, okay? So some examples, step by step. Fold number 1, name the one you're addressing. Oh God. I mean, these are just keeping it to the basics so that we don't overwhelm ourselves. We don't have to think about this too hard. It can just be, oh God, tick box. That's fine. If we're not feeling particularly creative, that's enough. Fold number 2, unfold the name you're addressing. So I've got a few here and I've referenced which collect in the prayer book I've taken these from. And when it says propers, you'll see that that's in the section for the season after Pentecost. These are for each Sunday that can be, each week that can exist between Pentecost